If you are a musical aficionado, as one in our sound booth I found out was this morning, you'll already know when you saw the title of the message that it relates to a song. It's an old black gospel from the American South. If you do a little bit of research, you know that it's written by a fellow, or at least performed by. There is some discrepancy about who actually wrote it. But Huddy William Ledbetter is his name. Spent a little time in prison. AKA his, the name that he often went by was Lead Belly. Most often sung this song to a driving beat of a blues guitar, and includes the following lyrics. There's a man going round taking names. There's a man going round taking names. He has taken my father's name. He has left my heart in pain. There's a man going round taking names. If you want to hear that, look it up on YouTube. And there's other choruses. He's taken my mother's name, my brother's name, my sister's name, my family's name. If you hang around it long enough, you begin to get a feeling that Johnny Cash picked up on that same song. His final album, Johnny Cash, pulled at least the refrain out of that, and he sprinkled around it themes from the Bible. He pulled out what I would call the apocalyptic section of the Old Testament, or the New Testament, because he was talking about Judgment Day, and it is a very ominous kind of song that has a beat to it that is almost like a funeral entourage or something. There's a man going around taking names. What do you think it means? It certainly gives the feeling that human relationships are out there, and if you look closely, at least at the original one, there is a reference almost like to a slave trader or to the death being the person that's coming along there. There's a man going around taking names. Even school children know about that. If you were raised in my time frame, then you know that on occasion the teacher would say, I'm going to step down the hallway here and I'm going to leave Dan in charge. That was the big mistake. But nevertheless, you would leave Dan in charge to take names while she was gone. And then you would write down the name. You didn't want your name taken down while the teacher was down the hall. There's somebody around here taking names. If you've been around the last few weeks as we've made our way through Advent, you know the first week we talked about when something was about to happen. We gave that sense of expectation. Last week, we reintroduced you to John the Baptist and remarked about how, we usually don't talk much about John the Baptist this time of the year, and yet he plays a significant role in what we do with Advent. And if you were here last week, you remember that we talked about how John the Baptist expected certain things in life. And those things that he expected was a godly goodness, a radical repentance, and a Christ-filled life. And so today we visit again first chapter of John. There came a man from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify about the light so that all might believe through him. He was not the light, but he came to testify about the light. And this is the testimony of John, when the Jews sent to him priests and Levites from Jerusalem to ask him, "Who are you?" And he confessed that he did not deny, but he confessed that I am not the Christ. And they asked him, "Well, what then? Are you Elijah?" And he said, "I am not." "Are you the prophet?" And he said, "I am not." And then they said to him, "Who are you, so that we may give an answer to those who sent us?" Somebody's taking names. "What do you say about yourself?" He said, "I am a voice, the one crying in the wilderness, make straight the way of the Lord," as Isaiah the prophet said. Now, they had been sent from the Pharisees. Does that give you a clue? Somebody's left the room and they're taking names. They asked him and they said to him, "Why then are you baptizing, if you are not the Christ or Elijah or the prophet?" And John answered them, saying, "I baptize in water. But among you stands one whom you do not know. It is he who comes after me, and the thong of his sandal I am not worthy to untie." And those things took place in Bethany beyond the Jordan where John was baptizing. Now, what in the world's going on here? When John the Baptist was at work in Bethany, beyond the Jordan River, a delegation of religious leaders came down to see him. They showed up at Jerusalem, and guess what? They were taking names. You could tell from the very first words to come from their mouths, they were taking names. Who are you? No small talk, no pictures about grandchildren being passed around. They wanted to know, who are you? And there are some people going around taking names. The first point I would want to be clear that you understand is this one. There is a difference between being introduced and being indicted. There is a difference between introductions and indictments. The first one is name-seeking. The other one is name-taking. The first one is an inquiry. The second one is an inquisition. The first one is an introduction, and the second one is an indictment. And there is a difference between name-seeking and name-taking. Name-seeking is quite innocent when you think about it. It's an innocent desire to get to know another person. Think about it in the settings that you've been in. A sales rep that you just met at a convention leans over and squints to look at your hello, I'm so-and-so, and you filled in the blank on your little badge. That's name-seeking. The woman's just moved into the apartment next to you, and she comes over to meet you. I'm Jane Morris in 4B, and she arches her eyebrow expectantly because she wants you to tell her who you are. That's name-seeking. But name-taking is something different. It does not want to know another person. It wants to put another person in a category and on trial. You've had that experience. How about the motorcycle cop who says, let me see your license, please? Yes, officer. Have I done something wrong? I say innocently to him. We sense we are almost already on trial when that kind of thing happens, don't we? Well, I'm sorry, says the clerk. I can't take your check without an ID. And so we pull out our credit cards. We pull out all of our children's pictures, whatever it might be. See, all these things will testify in the court of respectability that I am, in fact, a person of good character. Name-taking. Name-taking places a person on trial. It puts a kind of threat under them. Bill collectors do it amazingly well, if you've ever had one of those folks call you. If you've been around a traffic accident, you know that lots of people see it, and lots of people can tell about the story. But when it comes to wanting to put their name down and be a witness, it's very hard to find anybody to be a witness, isn't it? Have you ever noticed that? I've been looking for the opportunity to tell you about a young man who visited my front yard. You'll see it on a picture here in just a moment. Now, some of you know a little bit about this story. You know that's my front yard, and that's a truck in my front yard. I did not invite him to come up on my front yard like that. I want you to know that. I had been at a meeting just around the corner from my house a few months ago, and I had not eaten lunch, so I pulled in about mid-afternoon. It's about 3 o'clock, 2:30, 3 o'clock. I pulled in my garage. For those of you who know where my garage is, it's right there around where that police officer is. And just as I was getting out of my car, I looked up out the window of my garage, and there was a gentleman in a truck on my lawn coming at me through. I thought he was coming into my garage, to be honest with you. I had heard the engine revving very, very loudly, so I heard him pop the curb and come up on it. And I thought, well, I don't have a driveway in my front yard. I'm wondering why the gentleman's coming to see me that way. And he's twisting all across the front lawn, and it's then that I see him. I really see him. His arms are in the air, and he's going like this. Has no control over his car, and he slams into the entry of my house, and that little light pole over there went from like this to like this very, very quickly. His foot remained on the gas the whole time, and he spun until his tires went flat. Three little kids were in the back, and there was a gun laying in between his seats on his car, loaded. He did have a license. When I went out to see him, I didn't say hello. I had my phone out and a video camera going, as you might expect. I've never shown that to anybody. I don't plan on ever showing it to anybody. He was having a diabetic seizure. It was awful. It was absolutely awful. Now, put that picture in your mind. Because there was a lady that came down the street when I was making my way around after I'd found out that there was a gun in the car. My neighbor told me there was a gun, so I was on one side, she was on the other. She wanted to switch sides. She took care of the kids, and I took care of the gun. I didn't pick it up, but I watched it very closely until the police officers arrived. But it was the next thing that happened that I'll never forget. I heard a lady coming down the street, and her voice was echoing in my neighborhood, and she was screaming, cursing words at the gentleman that was now in my front yard. Evidently, he had hit her at the top of my street. And once she saw that he had made it into my driveway and was stopped, she was coming to share a bit of a piece of her mind with him about how she felt about him clipping her at the corner. And if you can imagine this was something how the voice went. You blankety blank, you blankety blank, you blankety 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 blank. And then as she's walking up my driveway, she sees him doing this, and she does an immediate turn around and went from you blankety blank to, oh, Lordy, Lordy, help him, help him, help him. Lordy, Lordy, help him. And I stopped and looked at her. She's on my videotape. And I said, what just happened? She was using God's name early, but then she started using God's name differently. There's a difference between introductions and indictments. She wasn't coming up there to give an introduction to this young man. She was coming up there to indict him. John the Baptist wasn't giving an introduction that day. John the Baptist was being indicted. Jesus came and we were trying to get an introduction to him, but he immediately got indicted, did he not? If that wasn't enough, the other day, there's a difference between introduction and indictments. I was sitting in my office on Friday. A Baptist preacher came into the office and identified himself. And his first comment to me was, I'm so-and-so. I've been called to preach, and I've been preaching for all these years. I'm retired now, and I'm going to make you mad, but here it is. Now, that's quite an introduction. He gave me an envelope, and it had a couple of these pamphlets in it. And it had a folded up card from an invitation that we sent to the community regarding the musical that we did. He said, this is going to make you mad, but if you can prove it to me, then I'll give you $100. This is and he may be watching, I hope he does this week. I'd like to be able to respond. This is a pamphlet that says, Baptists believe the Bible. And then it goes on to explain how the word Christmas is not found in the Bible. I will tell you that that's not news to me, and I hope it's not news to you. Christmas Mass, Christ Mass, 16th century is where the word came from. But let me do a little analysis here with you. And there is a point to all this, not just to show that I do understand what he's talking about. I don't know where you need to put this in order to see it really well. But that's the Greek word for Christ. Christos. That letter there is a chi. That's the Greek letter chi. When those of us shorten the word to Chimus, we're not taking Christ out of Christmas. That's a Greek symbol for Christ. And so what people do is they get all worked up and they take a few ideas about what they think, and they think people are taking Christ out of Christmas, or that because the word Christmas is not in the Bible, therefore we shouldn't use it because we put on our card Christmas music. Now, where am I going with this? As long as the church in America is going around taking names of people because of what they don't do, and they're indicting people because if they don't measure up, we are going to fail as a church. Let me say that again. We're introducing today a part of the strategic leadership team plan, and as long as we are indicting people, rather than engaging them, engaging the culture, just because the word Christmas is not used in the Bible, does that mean we should not enter this holiday and call people to the Christ that's in the middle of the word Christmas? Let me tell you what, I would fight for this gentleman's right to be able to do this. I would fight for it. But if this is the way we introduce people to Christmas, we, the church in America, will become dust in 50 years. It will. We are already seen as a bunch of wackos. Tell me the last time you saw a minister who, on television, who was portrayed in a positive way, except that he bought the time on television. When's the last time? It's not going to happen. Every generation lives within this tension between the curse of convenience and the challenge of relevancy. We are right there. We have to choose. How much are we willing to surrender ourselves to our community in a way that does not change the message, but in fact may impact our medium, the way in which we tell that message? That fellow would have passed out if he had known we actually had Santa Claus in the building yesterday. We've got to find a way to put new wine. That's what we have. We have a new message of salvation that changes people's lives. And if we are absolutely convinced that that's the truth, then we got to take that new wine and put it into old wineskins. No. The dictionary definition of a diabetic seizure, back to my story, it says a diabetic seizure occurs when the body receives a number of different signals from the brain that happen at the same time and contradict each other. Let me tell you what, our world is having a diabetic seizure right now. They're having all kinds of signals given to them, and what we need to do is to take the Christmas, take whatever we can in the culture and make sense of it. Let me go back to my lady again. Not unlike the lady running up the street to confront the person who's damaged her car, we run up to the world to confront them about how they have damaged our good old-time religion. And we do it with a finger pointed. Or we do it with a pamphlet on a urinal somewhere. When's the last time you read a urinal pamphlet? Oh, excuse me, ladies, you don't get those, do you? I mean, do you think excuse me, okay, back to, not unlike the lady running up the street to confront the person who damaged her car only to discover that the driver was disabled by a violent and severe convulsion, we run up to discover a world disabled and convulsing from a loss of the most basic nutrients of faith, hope, and love. Not unlike the lady running up the street to confront the person who damaged her car only to discover that the driver disabled by violent and severe convulsions. For her use of God's name and cursing the man's damage to her car now changes to petitions for God's healing of his condition. She turns and runs away, screaming for somebody else to help him. Lord, help him, as she's hightailing it down my driveway. Lord, help him. I ain't about to, but Lord, you help him now. I did not put my hands on her, but I wanted to. We righteously curse the darkness of our neighbor's wrongs and differences in our lives only to turn and run away, declaring the helplessness of their situation. Do you know where I'm going with this? There's a difference between introductions and indictments. There's a difference between knowing a name and knowing a person. Who are you, said the officials from Jerusalem. They were taking names, and quickly John moved from being a minister at work to being a man under threat. In fact, John was now on trial. The emissaries from Jerusalem had come to judge and jury and prosecution of him. It was the people of Jerusalem against John the Baptist. There's a man around taking names, isn't there? Woody Allen has a movie where there's a somber judge presiding, and the jury is listening intently, and the prosecuting attorney is laying out the case, and suddenly the rear doors of the courtroom swing open, and sure enough, a man enters, a distressed, wild-looking man, and he blurts out that he has a tearful confession, admitting that in the astonished court that he is there. We see the defendant and the guilty party, and the drama is startled, and the silence fills the room. The problem is that the man that has come into the courtroom to confess, in fact, that he did this crime, is in the wrong courtroom, because the courtroom, he points him to the other courtroom next door. Can't help see that without knowing there's almost always two trials going on, isn't there? Look at John the Baptist and look what's going on here. He confesses that he did not deny, but he confesses that I'm not the Christ. All of a sudden, the authorities had come with an affidavit, and John provides a testimony. The officials are conducting one courtroom, and John is insisting that he is witness in the next courtroom, the one that ultimately matters. You see, my front yard accuser convicted herself by attempting to convict the intruder of her life because she neither took the time to know his name nor to know his identity. And that happens all the time, doesn't it? It happens all the time. Is John the defendant or is the official? Is John on trial or is it the world? The earliest Christians must have heard the story of John's interrogation with great enthusiasm because they knew that it was coming and they were going to be, their names were going to be taken. You know what happened to Jesus, don't you? They said to him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" He says, "Do you say this?" There's two trials going on there, isn't there? Jesus turning an accuser into the defendant. Me, am I a Jew? What have you done? I bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth hears my voice. And then what did Pilate say? Pilate said, "What is the truth?" There's a difference between introductions and indictments. There's a difference between knowing a name and knowing a person. There's a difference between facing a trial and being found guilty. Life is filled with trials. Let me give you a few of yours this week. How about the student in school who must produce the papers and the grades and the SAT scores for the record? There's a trial going on there. The teachers of our children who now have less authority but more responsibility than any time in my lifetime. There's always a test and a trial going on, isn't there? In a career, there's always the need for you to demonstrate your competence. Yes, even in the ministry, there is that need. There's a stockholders meeting in which there are achievements of the corporate officers that are placed on the table. There are single people or divorced people who are often accused in the court of the gossip world of being unable to maintain long-term relationships. There's always a trial going on, isn't there? Parents enroll in effectiveness training because they might be found guilty of inadequate methods of raising their children. There's always somebody going around taking names. Could I pause for a moment and point you to a man by the name of Goodall who works for the National Football League and wonder about him? We are under constant trial. And you and I have got to understand who it is that we stand before. Apostle Paul once asked it. I stood at a funeral this week and read this scripture. Who then shall bring charge against God's elect? Who is it to condemn? And it goes on, and it tells that in fact, the world places us on trial every day, but what the world does not know is that we have already been tried in the greater court, and through the mercy of Christ, we have been found not guilty. You and I have that. Make no mistake about it. That does not place us in a favored place with God, but it does place us in a forgiven state with God. And if you and I think for one moment that we can hoard ourselves into this building and not tell the good news of Christ into this world, then we are not the church. The church never receives the good news. Israel tried that. You cannot be the recipient, the cistern of God's presence. We must be the conduit through which He lives and breathes and has life. We do not have a favored position with God. We have a forgiven position with God, and that forgiveness absolutely demands that you and I infiltrate our world. Why? John knew why. John said it this way: there stands among you, that's what he said to them, there stands among you one whom you do not know. Behold, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. Finally, there's a difference between taking a name and being given a name. The accusers of the world might take our names, but in Christ Jesus, we have been given a new name, and they will never be able to take away our name. They never will be able to take away. Most of you are old enough to remember the television series Roots. There's a scene in which the slave traders are trying to break the spirit of the young black man named Kunta Kinte. They've captured and brought him to America from his African homeland, and they've tied him up to a tree, and there they are, whipping him, attempting him to beat him into his new identity. And they keep telling him, your name is Toby. And he says, no, my name is not. And he resists, and the whips keep coming. Your name is Toby. No, finally, the punishment is absolutely more than he can imagine. The young man hangs his head in defeat and speaks one final word: my name is Toby. Black minister once spoke of his enraged reaction to that episode, which I suspect he was right. He admitted that for a moment he was consumed with hatred, not only for white people, but also with the whip of racism that brought humiliation and shame to others. And the only thing that kept his hatred from growing and settling into his heart was this simple fact. He said it this way: it was a man they tied to a tree and they beat him. And they took this man's life, but they could never take his name. And one day every knee will bow and every tongue will confess his name is Lord. Yep, I'm a little fired up today because I'm not going to share my faith in a pamphlet. I'm not going to share my faith when it fits me. I'm not going to use God's name in a way that is inappropriate and then petition Him when I get in trouble. When I gave Jeff the theme of what I was going to be talking about, he reminded me of a song, and we're going to sing it together according to a video. Now, we don't do that, but we saw the video, and it was so powerful that I want us to sing it together, not as an invitation yet. We'll have it, we're going to sing it once as an invitation, but I want you to see the video and experience this fact. You and I have been given the name of Christian. It's a new name. And it tells about our identity. It tells about who we are as a congregation and as a force, an influence into this community. I have a maker. Let's sing it together.
He formed my heart before even time began. My life was in His hand. He knows my name. He knows my every thought. He sees each tear that falls and hears me when I call. I have a Father, He calls me His own. He'll never leave me, no matter where I go. Sing the chorus with me. He knows my name. He knows my every thought. He sees each tear that falls and hears me when I call. He knows my name. He knows my every thought. He sees each tear that falls and hears me when I call. And hears me when I call. He hears me when I call.
And now we have a time where we're going to sing that together, standing. And if there's an opportunity for you to make things right with God, be a part of this church, surrender your heart, maybe you, whatever you might be dealing with, we have a time of invitation. You come as we stand and sing it together.
I have a